such a marvelous, spine-tingling end to that sutta, the proclamation of Venerable Koṇḍañña's stream entry. And, so rather touching the word the Buddha uses the word bo, which is very kind of informal, the recognition of the very long time that they'd known each other. As far as we understand, that Koṇḍañña was one of the astrologers, the youngest of the astrologers at the who was invited by King Suddhodana to the palace to prophesy the future of the newly born Prince Siddhartha. And so from his teens, from his the early age, the prospective enlightenment of the Buddha had been a central part of his life and something he'd been preparing for all that time. And the leader of the group of ascetics, the other four, we're told, were the sons of the more elderly astrologers of that group. And we know also from the story, I'm sure, that after going through great hardships, almost unimaginable torments of the body that the ascetics went through in their spiritual search, that the ultimate nightmare took place when it seemed as if the Buddha was turning his back on, or Siddhartha was turning his back on the path to enlightenment. Remember that there'd been this kind of ambiguity about his ultimate future. He would either be a wheel-turning monarch or a Buddha. So the way the doubting mind works, I'm sure that always in the back of their minds is the five ascetics, disciples of Siddhartha, the greatest of the ascetics. They must always have had that fear somewhere that perhaps he wasn't the real thing. Perhaps he would go back to his luxurious life in the palace, be a king, and leave them stranded. And so that must surely, at the times when they were performing these difficult feats of asceticism in the harsh sun, going without food, going without rest, and so on and so forth, that they must have every now and again just thought, well, what if this is all false? What if he's going to betray us and go back to the palace? And then it seemed as though it was going to happen. The Buddha takes some milk rice from Sujata, and they're disillusioned, they're angry. They walk away from him in disgust, not just to another quiet place down the road, but they walk something like 250 kilometers away to the west. They want to get as far away from him as they can, and go to Isipatana. And the Buddha follows them, walks that way. And when he arrives at first they're determined to treat him with indifference, treat him with the contempt he deserves. They won't get up and take his bowl, they won't wash his feet, they won't show the proper respect. But yet, in spite of themselves, they can't help doing it when he comes close. The old habits are to die too hard. But still there's anger, resentment there. And they address him in an informal way. And the Buddha for the first time refers to himself as the Tathagata. And it's from here that this discourse begins, where the Buddha says to them, look, no matter what you may think, no matter what interpretation you may have put upon my actions, at least grant me this, that I've never lied to you. Now I tell you that I've realized the truth. I'm the Tathagata. So they sit, and so straight away the Buddha goes to the heart of the issue, the fact that asceticism is not in itself a surefire way to truth. In fact, that no one could have been more ascetic, no one could have practiced harder than Siddhartha, and yet still he was unsuccessful. But at the same time, he's not reverting to old ways or standing up for sensuality. He preaches the middle way between the two. And so having addressed their immediate doubts, then the Buddha goes on to teach the Four Noble Truths, which are to form the basic structure, underlying foundation of all his teachings for the next 45 years. Teaches the truth of dukkha, truth of its cause, truth of its cessation, and truth of the path to its cessation. In the commentaries, the Buddha is sometimes referred to as the great physician. And using that simile, then his analysis of existence is like that of the doctor. The doctor's analysis of the problem, and dukkha is the illness. Samudaya is the root cause of the illness. Nirodha is the freedom from illness, the cure. And magga is the medicine, is the path, is the method by which freedom from illness may be realized. And this basic structure of the Four Noble Truths is one to really reflect upon again and again and again. A few years ago, when I came to be writing the biography of Ajahn Jayasaro before his funeral, seeking for a way of organizing the material and all the teachings that he gave over the years. And then eventually I realized that this was the obvious and most revealing way of of talking about Ajahn Chah's method of teaching to deal with it in terms of Four Noble Truths. It gave me a very useful tool for examining all the Dhamma talks he gave, all the short teachings he gave, and seemed to me worked quite well. And taking that structure, then certain parts of his teaching began to be very, very clear and to stand out. His emphasis over and over again that you must face, you must confront, you must look at suffering. Because if you don't look at suffering, you won't see it. Even if it's staring you right in the face, even if you're completely surrounded by suffering, you're drowning in suffering. It's not necessary to mean that you'll see it. And the seeing of suffering, the comprehension of suffering, comprehension of what suffering is, and the comprehension of the extent of suffering. This is the duty that the Buddha taught towards the first Noble Truths right from the beginning, in his very first discourse, in this Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. And so he's teaching the Four Noble Truths, but the Buddha is not confining himself to a mere incisive analysis. He's teaching a way, a pragmatic teaching. And this is something that is very distinctive, I think, of the teaching in the suttas, where it's very much a way of liberation. It's not systematic. Of course, after the Buddha's parinibbana, when there were many different schools, sects, Buddhism, there was the revival of the Brahmin religion under the name of Hinduism, and where Buddhism, the Buddhist sects had to define themselves in relation to others, and a need for systemization. So the Abhidhamma became to the fore, and it was an attempt to make a system out of something which had been before, a much more fluid way of liberation. So the Buddha is pointing to the problem, pointing to dukkha, pointing to human suffering, the unsatisfactoriness of existence, the inherently frustrating sort of shabbiness of conditioned existence, and pointing to its cause, but making the extremely important point that suffering is something which has to be comprehended, has to be fully seen, confronted, understood. This I see very, very clearly in Ajahn Chah's teachings, and the way that he would put us in situations where we would be frustrated, where our desires would be frustrated, in order to see the connection between dukkha and craving and desire. So not taking this connection as an intellectual proposition, but seeing it as being basic to our very existence in the world. The suffering is something that we are creating moment by moment through the craving founded in ignorance. So whenever there's ignorance, whenever there's lack of understanding, and when there's lack of paññā, lack of light, lack of clarity, then there is craving. Those two things arise together. And only in going against the stream of craving? Do we see the role of craving, the role of desire in the suffering that we experience in our life? So the Buddha is teaching us attitudes and paths of practice here. Dukkha is something to look at. So what is dukkha? In one of the suttas, there is a kind of a variation on the Four Noble Truths of seeing that which is to be comprehended, meaning dukkha, of course, but here the Buddha refers to the 5 grasped at khandhas: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and sense consciousness. The dukkha is inseparable from or identical to the 5 grasped at khandhas. So looking closely, moment by moment, at the 5 khandhas means the effort to comprehend dukkha. And seeing the grasped at khandhas as dukkha, seeing form as dukkha, seeing feeling as dukkha. We may see without too much difficulty that painful feeling is dukkha, but do we see pleasant feeling as dukkha? Do we see neutral feeling as dukkha? And that's not to say that pleasant feeling is a complete illusion, that it's not pleasant. It is pleasant, that's why it's called sukha vedana, but it isn't inherently unstable, and the more that we are attached to pleasant feeling, then the more we suffer when we're separated from it. There is a direct correlation there. So in the phrase of Ajahn Buddhadasa's, then Vedana bites us. It's something that's ready to bite you at any time that you're unaware if you're not careful. So seeing perception, the attachment to perception, as dukkha, seeing mental formations as dukkha, and we see our thoughts, our imaginations, our aspirations, all the various mental activity in the mind as dukkha, as part of the structure of dukkha, sense consciousness. So this is not an easy thing to do, and this is the challenge, to turn the focus of attention and clearly see the 5 khandhas as the 5 khandhas. This is the comprehension of dukkha. And then in this particular sutta, that which is to be abandoned is not as we would perhaps think, kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha, but avijja and bhava tanha. So bhava tanha is given particular importance and stands for in place of the other kinds of tanhas, implying that it is the basic fundamental craving, the craving to be, to become, to be something, be someone, and the craving for continued existence, the craving for eternal existence, the craving for selfhood, craving for self. So why is there a sense of self arising? Because we want one, because it's craving for self. It's bhava tanha. So the first 2 of the 4 Noble Truths are concerned with the problem and its cause, with suffering and its cause. The Buddha says in Dhammacakka Sutta, Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, that the first insight is the insight into dukkha as dukkha, knowing what dukkha means, experience of dukkha, understanding of dukkha. And the second is the recognition of the clear insight into samudaya, and seeing sensual craving as sensual craving, seeing the craving to be, to have, as the craving to be, to have, seeing the craving to not to be, not to have, to get rid of, to see them, to distinguish them, and then to see them as productive of dukkha. So this is the Satchanyana. See, this is the jnana which sees these things as they are, sees dukkha as dukkha, sees samudaya as samudaya, and then leading on from there to see that dukkha is something which must be comprehended, not something to be covered over, not something to turn our backs on, not something to run away from, but something to be penetrated. So setting up a whole attitude to dukkha as something to be interested in, to be focused on, and to the duty, the responsibility, or the practice as regards the second noble truth is to abandon it. So the practice to comprehend dukkha and to abandon its cause, craving, illuminates the movement in the opposite direction. That is, not to accept dukkha. So in modern parlance, repression, for instance, or consciously ignoring or minimizing, or finding some conceptual framework to make it less threatening. For instance, the idea that I was talking to someone recently. Okay, I wouldn't give up anything at all in life. It's all wonderful. It's all part of existence. The pain and the ecstasy, the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, they're all of what makes life full and wonderful. This is sort of a way of looking at life, at least looking at it at times when one is high and in ecstasy and in a pleasant state, rather than when one was in the opposite state, but a way of encompassing dukkha in a view which enables us to turn away from it, or not to open up to its full significance and ramifications. Craving is the insight is that it should be abandoned. It's probably most people are aware and sometimes conscious of craving, certainly with sensual cravings, and then this is an age in which people are told to be not to be ashamed of sensual cravings, and to be honest about them. Also, most people have insight at some time or other into desire for love, for security, for fame, for respect, to be remembered. These are all aspects of the bhava tanha. To be somebody, to be somebody to somebody, to be important, for one's life to mean something. And these kinds of desires all tend to cluster around us like basic bhava tanha, or vibhava tanha, the desire to annihilate, to get rid of, to shut down, to not to have to put up with. This is one which is a danger, isn't it, for samanas or for spiritual people, where we can use many of the teachings to justify kind of shutting down or turning away from things that we find disturbing or upsetting or expose the sides of ourselves that we don't particularly like. And we can take the teachings on viveka and seclusion and solitary abiding to justify that kind of vibhava tanha, not wanting to have, not wanting to be, which is again based on a sense of me, the person who is this way or has this problem or has this failure. So the insight that craving is something to abandon is maybe something that we carry around as a piece of our monastic baggage, but whether it actually comes to bear on experience moment by moment is another matter. So it's not just taking on this idea that suffering is to be comprehended and craving is to be abandoned, but abandoning moment by moment, having the will, the saddha, the courage to do that, not to take a refuge in craving. Is craving that the movement of craving is what we mistake for the center of our life, and it's quite shocking and humbling when we slow the mind down in meditation and begin to turn attention towards the movement of mind, and just to see how almost all of what we can observe is nothing more than the play, the display of one form of tanha or another. And apart from that, there's very little that we can distinguish at all. So if you're not going to take that as a refuge, that's where are you going to turn? And that's where the role of faith becomes so clear, where you're willing just to make that leap into the unknown, and to investigate what refuge in Buddha Dhamma Sangha actually means in your daily life. So the monk, the nun who is a member of the Arya Vamsa, the noble lineage, is one who takes joy in abandonment of the unwholesome, development of the wholesome. That means actually inclines with joy towards the abandonment of tanha. And this is the practice which is independent of posture. Wherever craving and attachment arises moment by moment, in whatever posture, and of course it is not restricted to meditation postures. It's coming up all the time. That's why there's this pressing need for alertness and vigilance in our minds at all times. That defilements don't have holidays, they don't have weekends, they don't have days off. They're ready to take over the mind at any moment, in which we're heedless and careless. So these are the first two of the noble truths that the Buddha pointed to. And the third, the truth of Nirodha, that there is a state, an unborn, Buddha said, an unborn, an undying state, which is beyond the samsaric realm. There is a duality, if you like, between the samsaric realm and the deathless, a weakness or lack of profundity. And I can't see how that you can say that wisdom and stupidity is the same thing. Just the same as you can say having presence of defilement and absence of defilement is the same thing. The same as nibbana and samsara. these are different, and the goal of spiritual life is the transcendence of samsara, and that transcendence is possible because there is an unborn, undying realm. And the Buddha has realized it, and many, countless numbers of Arya Pugalas, men and women of all races, beginning with Ajahn Koṇḍañña, have proved that through their own practice. So this is not a conditioned realm. It's not something that you can bring into existence. It is something to be clarified, to be realized, and thinks of the phrase where lay disciples or members of other sects hear the Dhamma for the first time, and they exclaim, "It's wonderful! It's like upturning something which had been overturned." So it's as if there's something that is already there. It's merely that it's overturned. And if you, no matter how bright the sun is, if you put something in a box, then that the intensity of the sunlight is not going to have any meaning. Or if you invert something, then that sunlight is meaningless. But you don't have to do anything to it. You don't have to affect any changes in its structure. Merely, all that has to be done is to recognize that it's inverted and to put it back into its proper place. And this is the duty towards the third noble truth. The practice is to illuminate, is to put it back where it should be, and put the mind back into the correct attitude towards existence, or to merely illuminate that which is already there. It's not something has to be created afresh. But before that can be done, there is a gradual training. This is not something that can be affected very easily, although it will be dependent a great deal on the bharami that one has accumulated over many lifetimes. For some people, it's easier than others, and the ease that some people experience and the difficulties that others experience are not simply a function of the amount of effort they put into practice or the sincerity, but it's because we've done varying amounts of work in previous lifetimes. As some people have a head start, and some people can find the whole process quite easy. Although 2,500 years on from the Buddha's the Buddha's parinibbana, then those kinds of human beings are very difficult to find these days. For most of us, it's much more difficult. But the practice is one which, although it may vary in its difficulty, is unchanging. It's one in which the threefold training, otherwise referred to in expanded into the Eightfold Path, is indispensable. There's no time and no place where any aspect of this path can be bypassed, eliminated. Each aspect of the path has to be developed, and this is the insight that we have to develop the path, not just talk about it, not just admire it or revere it, but actually put it into practice. It's like the key to the prison. We're in the prison, and we've got the key. All we have to do is put it into the lock and open the door. So the training is one of development of view, wisdom, right understanding, beginning with a firm confidence in our own capacity for enlightenment, firm belief in the efficacy of action, the fact that we create ourselves, we create our lives through our volitional actions of body, speech and mind, that we are the heirs to our actions, we abide supported by our actions. So belief in the capacity, human capacity for enlightenment, our own capacity for enlightenment, belief, confidence, trust in the law of karma. This is the foundation for the right view, which is the initial part of the path. This leads to right aspiration, right thoughts free of sensuality, wholesome thoughts, untainted by sensual desire, thoughts of kindness and goodwill, thoughts of compassion. So when the mind is set up right, it has a basic, right, correct, intelligent, wise attitude to life. Then wise, intelligent, benevolent thoughts sprout from such a mind. And from that leads on to the expression of that wisdom and maturity in our actions in the world, in the way that we act, the way that we speak, the way that we conduct our lives, in our way of earning our livelihood. And from that, with a moral and intelligent way of living in the world based on right attitude and right thought, and then we put effort into the abandoning of the unwholesome and the development of the wholesome in every posture, in every part of the day, in every part of our lives. Make the effort to be mindful, the effort to recollect that which should be recollected, recollect that information and teachings we have received from the Buddha and his disciples. Remember them at times when they need to be remembered, to recollect, to be present to our daily experience, to be aware of the body, of feelings, of mental states, of kusala dhammas and akusala dhammas that are arising in the mind, seeing them as just that, not creating a sense of self from these phenomena. And finally, it's most important for this oiling and giving the power and the integrity for the fundamental changes needed. There is development of concentration, being able to abandon the 5 hindrances, taking the mind beyond sensuality, beyond wholesome dhammas, taking the mind to the refined states of calm, states free of conceptual thought, states of blissful states, states of intense clarity, equanimity, enabling the sammaditthi on the higher level of insight into in aniccaṃ dukkhaṃ anattā to manifest in the mind. So seeing the necessity, seeing the nobility of this search for Nirodha, and then going about it to the best of one's ability through carefully attending to each aspect of the path. And this is the work, this is the discourse kammatthān, this is the search which all of us have embarked upon. So in your practice, really encourage you to, coming back to these very profound teachings in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, which we chanted just now, that I've really just scratched the surface in this Dhamma talk. There is so much to come back to again and again, and to say in that very last phrase, the awakening of Ajahn Koṇḍañña. He's the first bhikkhu, the first bhikkhu disciple of the Buddha, and it was through his breakthrough that the whole sangha of monks was begun, and we owe him a great debt of gratitude. And the thing that I come back to again and again is what was the substance of his enlightenment on that day. Nothing so very complicated and intellectually difficult, is it? What was it that Ajahn Koṇḍañña awoke to? What was the substance of his the Dhamma vision? It was simply that which is subject to arising is subject to passing away. So the most profound insight in the in the history of religious discipline, religious search after the Buddha's own enlightenment was something which sounds so simple, and yet within it is something so marvelous. So just please keep coming back to that. Whatever has the nature to arise, has the nature to pass away, because it's right there that our own breakthrough will sooner or later take place. So I'd like to offer you these few reflections on the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta this evening.